So, yeah, thanks for jumping in early, David. Live stream, we got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Let's double
good.
check.
Look.
Double check. Okay,
So,
live.
live. Okay, so someone's here. That's good. Yeah, cool. So we're gonna have some. So it will be like Europe, like Holochain Europe, that will be around right now because it's pretty early in the UK. Maybe even not even Europe.
Yeah, no, who knows? Who knows? It's I mean, probably some US or late in the US, Australia or Asia. But yeah, it might be a little bit early for Europe. If we want to hit Europe time zone, we might do one next week that's a little bit more agreeable for Europe time zone. Yeah. Yep.
It sounds good. Have you had a cup of tea already?
No, haven't had anything. No, I just had some moringa powder.
Moringa powder.
Yeah.
That's good. I like it. I'm on my this is so well, this is funny. So I kind of get to 4:30 in the afternoon. I've never shaken this. I always have to have a cup of tea. Like it's just, and it's so horribly British, but it's something I can't get rid of. I'm just like, I have to accept it. It's watching the me. But like even here, and now I found you can get Australian afternoon tea, which is like a proper thing. So I'm very excited. Hey, we're live, which is awesome. I can see it on YouTube, and we got a few thumbs up already. And so I guess we can say to people, hello, welcome.
Yeah.
We are at the Iron hosting a Holochain AMA with David, and a Holo AMA, I guess. We were talking about Holo as well, which is really, really cool. And so we were asking anyone who's watching and everyone who's watching to put your questions in and put them into the YouTube comments and the chat underneath. And then we'll get those questions and we'll answer them as they sort of come up. So yeah, hey, David.
How you doing?
Good.
Getting excited about everything coming together.
Yeah, it's coming together. Getting really excited. There's, it's a lot happening. We go live on TrustSwap in like 13 hours, maybe something like that. So that's pretty good. And we're on TrustPad next week, and then some exciting stuff coming up for next week as well for TG next Thursday. So yeah, this has been 3 years in the making, I suppose. So,
yeah. Really how does it feel getting this close now?
It feels, first of all, it feels amazing. It feels really good to be getting this close. It also feels like it's like the ship is forming its shape. Do you know what I mean? Like it's been this kind of thing for a long time, and even in the last couple of days, as we know, like it's even forming more shape and getting more kind of like, I don't know, it's like that. It's kind of like, all the things are coming together at the same time to make it work, and that's really cool. It's also, it's hectic. Like there's a lot going on. It's busy, because it's just a massive organizational feat to get this to happen. Got a lot of support there, which is really good. But yeah, in all honesty, it feels really good. I think it's going to go really well. I'm excited. I had some good conversations with one of the launch pads earlier today. It was saying there is a lot of demand for what you guys are doing, which is really cool. From outside of the ecosystem, but also obviously within the ecosystem. So that feels good. It's just like a question now of let's just hold on and make this happen. So very excited. How are you? I mean, you've been involved with us for so long and helped so much. And obviously you're involved with Iron as well. And so what are you, how do you feel about what's going on?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, I think I'm just the kind of character that likes to get involved really early and know the right people are in place and the right things are happening, and then step back. So I'm enjoying a little bit of that, and I know that feeling that you guys are going through right now of like not just close to the TG, but also that rush of like as things become real, suddenly the way you look at them changes. and it comes with like that much more intensity and clarity. And so I'm really enjoying that kind of phase as well, of like, as you sort of say, seeing everything come together, seeing that focus and clarity, and then I think that springboard into what's possible. And I'm really convinced, and I'm not surprised there's a lot of demand, because I'm convinced that like a proposition in this space that shows how blockchain, holochain come together at the grid level, I just think it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it's something that both the combination of the energy space and blockchain space hasn't quite woken up to. But with everything going on in the Bitcoin world, mining world, ESG world, it's just a no-brainer. And I think, like, you've seen this years in advance. And like all the good things, there's kind of a convergence that eventually gets there, where other people start to see what you've seen. And yeah, I think that should just set up Iron really, really, really well over the next couple of years for relationships, partnerships, opportunities, and spaces to deploy tech. So yeah, I'm kind of that person where it's like, okay, I felt like there was the right team in place a few months ago for the launch, and now you see the focus and concentration there. And then my perspective is a little bit more, okay, how does Iron fit into that broader ecosystem, and how does Iron really shape? How does it shape itself, the holochain ecosystem, but also open up that space for energy solutions in the decentralized world, because it's pretty narrow at the moment, not really perceived as a major player in the decentralized ecosystem.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. And it's not perceived as a major player in the decentralized ecosystem right now. And I think that's, we've talked about this a lot around what are those three big innovations we want to bring to that system through this protocol, through this shift. And I think there is so much that can happen in that through partnerships that are doing interesting things that we can leverage. And that's that. I think we talked about this from the very beginning, right? And with Art and others, was like, how the question to us at RedGrid was, how willing are you guys to partner with other people? And it was a great question, and it's true, right? You have to partner with others to make this happen. And in the decentralized world, we've seen this vision for where energy is something that isn't just electrons coming into your house and you paying a centralized bill like a retailer. It's just not that going to be that forever. And so how can we build the systems that enable that to transition really well? And how do we include people, really get people back into the mix? And so they do something fun with it. And I agree. I think it's a no-brainer, because it is just such a huge industry, such a huge thing to happen. And we won't be the only ones doing it. There's a bunch of others doing it. But I think I had a great call yesterday with a partner who does some fantastic linking mechanisms between different entities in the decentralized space. And it was just, we talked about how even people who could be perceived to be our competitors, like, well, actually, no, we're kind of doing different things. So how do we build those bridges? And that's the next challenge, right? How do we've got the ship, it's nicely formed, it's moving, it sets us up really well for the next few years. That is now then the job to build those things that mean something to someone else. And so actually start getting product into place.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
And that's the exciting bit, because it's great to talk about the theory, but it's also fantastic to have the real stuff happening and build it out. So I guess my question, I'd like to sort of throw a question to you, David, when, to start this off. We're waiting for a few questions to come through on the channel. But when you're thinking through this stuff and you're looking at building something completely new, which you've done a number of times, what is the thing that sets that germ alight for you inside you that goes, yeah, you know what? There's something here. Can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something here that we can do. What kind of, can you describe that experience? Because it's a fascinating insight here.
Maybe not in a way that would make sense to anyone. I don't think, because sometimes I'd say it's not a rational process, a lot of it, and describing things that are not rational have a way of taking something what's like beautiful inside and making it seem like nonsense in a way. It's funny because I was actually chatting to a guy last night who has lots and lots and lots of ideas. always coming up with ideas. And I was thinking, like, well, how do you validate what's an idea that's worth pursuing and what's not?
That's a hard question.
Exactly. Well, reality is it's an unanswerable question, and that's that one of the chasms that you need to leap over as an entrepreneur. And I think like for me, these potentials or these ideas also come with people. They always come with other people. Nothing I do is alone, because I get so much joy out of the interaction and seeing the ideas come to life in others. And so the validation for me and what I see is possible, and I see it so clearly here, is there's a space in an industry that most people can't see, or there's a way of looking at the problem that is uncommon, and it slightly inverts the problem, and it has a series of consequences for an ecosystem around that problem that open up new opportunities, and that there's someone or a group of people that are committed to that in a way that like completely aligns with their principles and who they are, so that when the million things that will always go wrong, each one of them go wrong, when the sort of the person or the team gets knocked down, they can't not go back to that problem. And I think it's the combination of those two things. I think I really have the perspective that it's all inevitable. It's all the things that need to get built are going to be built. Okay. It's just who, how, what, where, when. And so yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but for me, that's that part of the process. It's like, in a way, it's already been done, but at the same time, it's never been done. And the inevitability and the coming together of the inevitability, I think, is the beautiful part. And, then there's all the millions of rational decisions. So it's kind of a real like alignment of the head, heart, and gut when it's at its best.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, right? So you kind of head, heart, and gut for when you're trying to do something. It sort of feels like it's over the horizon. There's no way of answering what it could be, because it's just too far away. And it's like, we often get that as well. Like when you're in standard startup world, it's like, you got to go out and validate your idea. That is true. You got to validate your idea with someone. You got to validate your idea with something that sort of says, okay, yeah, I think there's something in there. Like you can't just be completely out there by itself, because it never becomes anything. But there is, at some point, you've got to say, I'm making a choice that this is inexorable. This is the way the world's going. And I'm going to build and iterate as we do this, and on something that is different to what is out there already. And that's the tricky bit. I think, you're trying to do this stuff. But I love what you said there. It comes with a person, and it comes with a group of people, and it comes with an idea, and it comes with some vehicle. Exactly. And that feeling. And then you can actually say, well, okay, cool. There's something in here that it won't be exactly what we thought it is, but it will turn into something really useful.
Exactly.
I like that. That's really nice. So I'm just looking at our YouTube channel. And so we've got a few people watching. So if you are watching, please jump in, ask us any questions. We've got a few questions that have come through. Cool. So I've got a question here from Ryan. And what we'll do, I guess, David, you and I will kind of tag team some answers in this. So from Ryan's question, my question is, what are you working on right now with Holochain and Iron seems revolutionary? How would you compare this movement in tech from where the internet first took off? Is it a revolution? That's a good question. So is it revolutionary? Well, yes, I think there's definitely some revolutionary components in what this technology is. I mean, like Holochain completely reworks the way we look at the decentralized computing, cloud computing approach, and we're revolutionizing the way that essentially identities exist in the electricity network. How does it relate to how the internet first took off? Do you want to talk about that, David? I've got a couple ideas.
No, you go for it.
All right. So I think you'll have seen, maybe it was in this talk. So the talk that we've got on the ecology of energy from 2019, I think we had a slide in there that had the original picture of the internet. And it's like, you see Santa Barbara, Stanford, I think it was Harvard or MIT over on the East Coast, and then it had Hawaii. And there were like, and a couple more, and there were like 6 nodes in the internet. That's where the internet was, ARPANET at that time. That's where it came from. And it was a military setup, military/university setup. And then what was really interesting is that it started to build out. I mean, the first one was the cable out to Hawaii to, through the telephone system. So that Hawaii had a node as well. Okay, that was kind of like the first overseas version. And then the cables got laid, and slowly but surely the internet grew. And that was if I'm not correct, if I'm not incorrect, I think it was 1973. So, and that was Tim Berners-Lee and Vint Cerf building out this thing. And what was cool about seeing that, and why we bring this up sometimes, is that it was only 6 or 7 nodes. It wasn't very big. It was just those things. And they were trying to do something super simple, send a picture from one place to another down a telephone line. And I think what's interesting here, and how when the internet turned into a revolution, there's a couple of good reasons. Well, firstly, a lot more nodes appeared because it became more organic to set up a node and enable that to happen. Compute power got easier, of course. But the bit that really hit us hard was Vint Cerf's quote, which was, "To unleash the power of the internet, you have to make it free." That was, I think, that paraphrase it maybe, but that was pretty much his quote. And what was really cool about that is that there was that whole war about this information superhighway, which is proprietary, and then there was the internet, the TCP/IP, which is open source. And I think that's where I might compare what we're trying to do here, is that there are lots of different people trying to do sort of more or less similar things, and there's just different ways of doing it. But I think the fact that we've started with a few nodes on decentralization, obviously a lot more. With Holochain and with Iron, we have many, many, many nodes, because any device can be a validation node if it wants to be, and it can start from the ground up, and that's really cool. So I think what we're saying here is that the comparison is, okay, the more nodes you've got, the better the structure. And Metcalfe's law may or may not, be real. It seems to work with the internet. It seems to work with that as a kind of proxy, and it probably will work with this as well. But the key bit is more nodes equal a more powerful system. And our nodes aren't, they aren't nodes that hold global consensus. These are nodes that work in a holochain system and enable them to communicate with each other without having to refer to a global consensus. And so we get a much more frictionless system. And then the second part is open sourcing the Internet of Energy Protocol. So it's like TCP/IP. That's what we want it to be. And people will build stuff on it that we could never have imagined. Amazing energy programs and applications and other things that work locally or work for someone else on the other side of the world that they've never met, that they can give to them or sell to them or do something on the protocol. I think that's, we couldn't imagine, Vint Cerf, Tim Berners-Lee couldn't imagine what the internet would do. And so we can't imagine what this will do, but I think that's where a nice analogy sits for it. That would be my answer. What do you think?
Okay. I think I'm going to ask you the next question, because I can't top that. Let's say I have a house and need energy. This is from Annie Biet. Let's say I have a house and need energy. How do I get to use your protocol to power my house?
Yeah, cool. So the way this would work is you can buy some IAM tokens, you stake those IAM tokens, they can then be rolled out to be Internet of Energy community credits. And that's the Holochain mutual credit system that runs locally. And so then you can imagine there are a number of houses in that local community that have got some validation devices in there. They might be a smart plug, it could be a smart meter, it could be a few people with just the mobile app running there. They're part of the system as well. And essentially what it means then is there will be, you can trade the credit associated with that either as energy itself, as kilowatt hours, depending on what the network conditions are, but it can also be traded as energy use value. And that's really important here, because some of the value that what we're trying to solve here, a lot of the value is coming from how we balance out the grid and make it work really seamlessly. And the way that works is when there's too much demand for energy, networks, when there's too much demand for energy, we get this a lot here, it's too hot, everyone's demanding energy at the same time, networks will shut down. They'll have to shut down the electricity system because it just gets overloaded with demand. It can't provide it. And so you get these rolling brownouts we see in California, or you get the network provider decides to cut the power to the whole thing. And so what we can do is we can say, right, great, if I want to provide a bit more power earlier in the day to compare to someone else, I get paid some of those credits because I've been a good energy actor in the system. And that happens already. It exists here. It's called demand response. It exists in the US, exists all over Europe. It doesn't exist at that micro level of the machines doing it in a blockchain or a holochain system to enable that to happen and transact it completely. And so what that means is you start to be able to pay or get paid for taking energy action. You don't have to have solar panels. You just have to be part of the system and take some action. Helps if you've got a few kind of cheap smart plugs that we've got certified and running the ION protocol. They can then help you transacting that a bit easier, but it's not absolutely necessary. So the question, if you need some energy, what would happen is you may have some credits that you've stored by staking your ION tokens into IOEC. Then you would say, hey, I want to turn my air conditioner up a bit more. It would send a message to the other air conditioners that are around and say, hey, anyone happy to go down a bit? And we're like, yeah, cool, we're happy to go down a bit. Okay, great. So your air conditioner takes a bit more energy, their air conditioner takes a little bit less, and you pay them a little bit of your IOEC. And so the next day, they might want a bit more, you might want a bit less, and they pay it back to you. And that's all it is. It's just it's a mutual credit zero-sum system that enables a different economic incentives and social incentives to work through. And as it evolves, there are embedded networks where you can actually pay for the actual kilowatt hours. There'll be other incentives that come with certain retailers that might be in the country you're in or the place you're living, whereby that can actually relate to just genuine solar power being produced and shared between the houses. And the key bit about ION is that it's a payments platform that enables basically everything to plug into it. And so we're testing this right now with Neighbourhood Batteries in Australia, and enabling us to understand how you might, genuinely move that around. And that part about Neighbourhood Batteries is super interesting because you'd be paying into the system with your IOEC credits and getting energy out of the battery. And the battery acts as a reserve for those credits going up and down. That's a pretty technical answer, but I hope it.
Amazing. Well, let me jump into it. So Marco Lazzarani asks, why did ION choose to build on a hybrid holochain blockchain solution and not only holochain?
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. I'll say my quick first answer. I love your bit on the end of this as well, David, because we wanted to build a hybrid version because there's a lot of great work happening in the blockchain. I mean, that's just simple. There's a lot of great work happening in blockchain, lots of innovation, loads of stuff happening in DeFi, loads of stuff happening that's really interesting, that's providing real utility outside of energy, but in financial markets and a bunch of different things. And we're really interested in participating in that network as much as possible. And that's just why we built ION as an ERC20 Ethereum token that can plug into layer 2 like Polygon, and layer 3s as we build our DeFi partnerships out, and then down in holochain for mutual credit. Mutual credit works super well at the local level for energy, but there's all this value that can be created on top of the blockchain. But David, you know that intimately, that relationship between blockchain and holochain and what's happening in blockchain right now. What do you think what do you see as kind of benefits that can come from that?
Well, I think the first thing is that we see how much you can do in the blockchain ecosystem now with an ERC20 token and building utility on top of that token. And so I think as nothing more, as you were talking a little bit about, if you lock or stake your ION and that unlocks IOEC in the future, the more that can be done with your ION over that period as the IOC network unfolds, the better. And I think we don't truly know the possibilities of the kind of the interplay between an ERC20 standard or a fungible token on the sort of in a blockchain ecosystem powered by smart contracts, and then how that might relate to a holochain mutual credit currency. But I think the hypothesis is it's going to unlock another wave of innovation and value to the same extent or even greater than the current blockchain ecosystem. But most likely they will be sitting alongside each other rather than, people saying holochain will completely replace blockchain. What we're going to find is that blockchain is phenomenal for a set of use cases, and holochain as well. They're different design patterns to solve different problems. And I think the part of it is what a fantastic opportunity to then take the best of both worlds and bridge them, rather than make a decision that says one world's going to be better. Because it just doesn't make sense for a project and a movement the size of ION. Both are going to be required to capture and distribute value at a technical and a social level.
Yeah, that's really good. So to create, capture, and distribute value, absolutely, because it's not. I had a chat with this, yeah, person that we know pretty well, you know well as well, in terms of linking in as in a DeFi protocol, and it was really interesting in saying like, you guys, you can do so much with these other partners. There's so much that you can just build together that just makes sense. Like it's not capturing one big thing, and no one's going to own everything in this. And I think that's exactly what it seems like. There's such an if we just chose one, we would just basically like we're letting half like we're cutting off a whole bunch of people who benefit or could really help us. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Or technology that's already been built, or ways people can relate to that technology that makes sense. And
yeah,
there's so many things you can do with thinking about like the pre-purchase of energy credits, and and um and your participation, in the Ion network to be able to access those credits, and especially, as I think you said in the answer to the first question, um, especially when something catches fire, and you start to see people doing things that you never knew or expected
mm,
with what you've put out in the world. And I think that's also a really strong possibility as IOC starts to come into being, and we start to see the energy credits moving on chain as
mm,
it is, then the relationship upstream as well to the ERC20 token and what's going to happen on that ERC20 token based on the existing and growing blockchain ecosystem is also pretty cool to think through. I mean, it's a way for people who are into blockchain to think of like how trillions of dollars of value, that's not currently on chain, starts to move
mm,
on chain as well. So
I really
interesting,
like that.
really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's sort of one of those. It's a it's a biological play. You're not really sure what's going to happen because there's so much can come from it. So yeah.
Exactly. All right, let's go. Eric, is there a maximum Ion purchase per person today? So going straight into
Yeah,
IDO details. Do you want to take this and take it a little bit broader and just give us like the maximum purchase, but also like what's going on with the process? Where are things at? What can people expect in the next week?
yeah, cool. Thanks, David. Great question, Eric. Thank you. So we're launching on Launchpad. So we've got two fantastic launchpads which are public now, which is Trust Swap, which is opening in about 13, 14 hours, and TrustPad. So to get involved, it just goes through. So the best thing to do is jump into our Telegram group and go to our Medium page. We've got a Medium page that's and a Medium article that's all on how to get involved with TrustSwap and go through their process to buy the tokens. They've got a fantastic process that just takes you through it from start to finish, and you can basically bid into that to win a place in the system to then basically whitelisted to buy the tokens when it comes out. And so the maximum best thing to do is go to the TrustSwap page because they have all of those details associated with it there. But we've also got TrustPad happening next week as well, another fantastic launch pad. So we're going to be doing a dual IDO. And again, we'll be releasing an article on TrustPad very shortly, and you can just follow that. So TrustSwap opens on the 8th, closes on the 11th, and TrustPad opens I think it opens on the 10th and closes on the 11th. I think it's a shorter window. So have a look at those. And then we are releasing on an exchange, which is happening later next week. And if you've seen our PR, you'll know that's happening on Gate. So we'll have, so Gate.io will be our exchange then. So that's really exciting. That's when, yeah, jump in there, see the details, get involved. We'd love to have you. Cool.
I think
John,
the other thing, just the other thing to note is just behind the scenes. I think the team have been working incredibly hard to make sure that all of the foundations are in place, that the TGE goes well, that it's protected from bots and sniping and all of those kind of things as much as possible. And there's a lot of fantastic people behind, I think behind the scenes, or some less so, who are really aligned on making this a big success. I think everyone's put in a huge amount of effort. So yeah, for those of you excited to participate, I think someone here has said, Eric has written in, and Eric wrote this question and has also written, I wanted to just give the team big congrats to the whole team. There's a big day, and I know there's been so much work and dedication behind the scenes, and yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah. No, it's a really good call, David. That there's a lot of lot of work happening that is just, just securing things up, making it really work well. Lots and lots of conversations that have been happening over the last 6 or 7 months to make this happen explicitly on this week, this today and tomorrow and next week. So there's a lot happening there. There's some really exciting news on staking mechanisms and earning from your tokens that's going to be coming out very shortly as well. So we're really excited about what that does. And it's everything we're doing is aligned to bring the community along with us as we develop this over the next couple of years and deploy it. It's really focused on it's a super utility token. That's exactly where it's at. Like it really is focused on building out the network, building out what we're going to do here. So that's what's really exciting here. And so yeah, the IDO and the launch, we've got a lot of great people working with us to make it work really well. So we're very excited. Yeah, thank you, Eric. Really, really cool. So John said, I've just finished a white paper. I like this. What do I need to get started with Iron? Yeah, fantastic. The best thing to do is jump into our Telegram group, follow us on Twitter. So in the show notes, all of that will be below as well. So the best thing to do there is jump in those. You'll have all the first information on Telegram group and on Twitter. And so just follow us there, make sure you're engaged in that conversation. If you want to be involved with Iron, as in you want to be a community ambassador or work with us in some other way, please direct message Harry, who's our community manager. He'll be able to help guide you and help you kind of come into the system and help us with that. We've got loads of people who want to help, which is so good. Like, it's amazing. People want to just be involved and build this. So that's really cool. And the other one is follow our Medium articles that take you to TrustSwap and TrustPad, and they'll show you all the way through to be involved and to be able to start with Iron.
Awesome. I'm gonna jump and grab you the next question.
Oh, thanks, David.
Okay. Hang on. So let's go. Sam. It's probably two. Okay, so I think John, you've answered. So Sam's said, is Iron just about microgrids?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, a fire by the ocean is so cool.
And then the other question he's come through is, what is the best way for individuals around the world to get involved?
Okay,
he's got a couple of questions there.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Sam. So is Iron just about microgrids? So the big answer is no, it's not. But it's also a definitional thing, right? So we actually call what we're doing virtual microgrids. And so the reason we say that is the virtual microgrid is the fact that a microgrid has tended to be someone coming in and setting up, a bunch of solar panels here, and wires and poles, and bringing it together, or setting up a bunch of distributed energy resources in a certain place and enabling that to become then a microgrid. So a microgrid is a grid that can run and work together, but it's also connected to the macro grid, it's connected to the main grid. Whereas a mini grid is normally kind of off the main grid, it's out somewhere else in a rural area. And so Iron technology doesn't just have to work in microgrids, it also works in mini grids, because it's essentially the same technology. All it is the ability to have a bunch of different devices with addresses, understanding each other and coordinating together. So that could happen in these mini grids out in the rural areas, but it can also happen. We see it mostly happening in the grid areas that are already connected to the main grid. The key with the main grid is it's outdated, and it's been made to transport electrons one way, not two ways. And that's been the major problem. So what the microgrid, why we call it virtual microgrid, is we're not talking about someone has to start with a $1 million investment with loads of infrastructure that goes in. A virtual microgrid happens when a few people download the Iron app, start to use the Iron app, start to stake some Iron tokens, download the app, maybe they have a couple of devices running in their system that are talking to other devices, and those devices start to coordinate together. Now that could be 3 different houses with smart plugs on their dryers talking to each other. That's essentially a virtual microgrid, because that grid is then working with each other to do it. Now, there's a few use cases that we've got that are happening that it has to stay really local. Yes, okay, it could be my street, and we have a battery at the end of the street. That's a virtual microgrid. Sometimes we just interact along our street with our battery. Sometimes we go out to the main grid. It just depends. And the system that we've built, and our CTO Sim has simulated this, we put it together and we've been testing this, is it actually kind of expands and contracts around areas of pressure points in the grid. And that's why it's a virtual microgrid. It's not a static thing that sits there on 15 houses. It's actually something that grows organically, house by house, plug by plug, That's why holochain is so important, because it's agent centric, and then grows out, and then those things interact together. And like the swallows, the what is it called? I can't remember the name. All the swallows swarm together. It's like they move like that, and it moves around and it interacts with each other. All those different devices interact with each other. And that's why it's not just a microgrid solution. There's lots of fantastic people doing great microgrid solutions. We're producing a solution here that is from the bottom up, from the device level upwards into the house, that enables then all those houses and commercial industrial places as well to interact together and communicate and coordinate together. And that might get bigger and smaller depending on the need of the grid. So yeah, it's much bigger than just being a microgrid solution.
Okay, what I'm hearing from that is the way a microgrid might get thought of is effectively forced connections between devices, so you know the parameters and the bounds of the microgrid. Whereas what we're hearing with ION is actually you're giving the capacity for all of the devices to make peer-to-peer links between two-way peer-to-peer links between each other. So the actual picture of the grid is completely evolvable based on what links need to be created at any one time. So there's the overall capacity for communication, which grows exponentially as more devices are connected, but the actual grid itself is simply a representation of those like recent communications.
That's exactly right. Perfectly described. Yeah, thank you. That's a snippet we're going to use.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. I could have had a more smiley face.
Yeah.
but it is 6:40 in the morning. Forgive
I know
me.
it's early.
Okay, let's do the regulated one from John. So it sounds to me like there needs to be a big push from regulators to allow two-way energy system. Are you planning to collaborate with various local, national governments, whatever regulators, etc.?
Yeah, so absolutely, there's a lot of work's going to happen with the governments here as well, and that's true. And to be honest, we've already worked on government-funded projects. We also co-fund into a collaborative research, cooperative research centre here in Australia, where we're working with some of the best universities in Australia. That's government-funded, and we're putting some funds into that to do R&D that's working on this. And we've been winning some government grants to deliver our technology. So absolutely, governments are going to be really important in this. And, you know, it's really interesting because if you look at the electricity networks, pretty much all electricity networks, actually, no, it's not entirely true, but most electricity networks evolved to become government owned. Then they got devolved to become privatized again. At the very beginning, you know, Edison was producing his grids, and they were in the major cities. And so they were actually privately owned independent grids in smaller cities in the US, which is really, really interesting. So we're kind of going back to more of that model before, which is really interesting. So I think when we talk about governments
At a different scale.
Yeah, exactly. At a far bigger scale, but a much more localized, but interactive scale.
Exactly. And one thing, sorry to jump in, but that is quite a common pattern of societal and technological evolution. I think people have this perspective that we're always going like this, but the way like it is actually a lot more of a pendulum, and as something is unlocked, and that's kind of what Holochain is saying with the capacity for distributed applications. It's kind of like you get to the heavily centralized world, you actually move way closer back to how things used to look with local servers, except suddenly you don't have local servers, you have a completely interconnected network. So it's like you almost have what, you know, the original heavily centralized move back to distributed. And then of course, as you've moved there and that world starts to scale and expand 10, 15, 20 years, something's going to draw you back to a different pattern, you know? So yeah, I completely get where you're coming from anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, David, it's so true. And it's really interesting, like that pendulum, as you described there, of just socio-technical transitions. That's just the way it works, because whenever something becomes really useful and really, is not fully kind of understood by regulation and by government, it's going to get pulled in by regulation. And regulation does a lot of good stuff, like it makes sure people are safe, it makes sure that nothing untoward is happening. That's really good. But then it tends to sometimes make things claustrophobic, slows things down, slows down innovation. Then it gets privatized first, and then it gets decentralized and pushed back out even further. So
Exactly.
yeah, I really like that. But in this meantime, but this is interesting, right? Because we can talk about the theory of those things, but when you're doing it, the reality is you have to have a lot of conversations with everyone who's already in it, who are in government and who are in big industry doing this, and they're really good productive conversations, because there's also a bunch of individuals there who see that same pattern, who want to see this happen as well. So yeah, we're very excited about that. Yeah, so I've got a question here. Would you see iron getting adopted by energy utilities, or is it a home-based solution? Yeah, it's a really good question again, Ryan. So we're building a technology platform that can absolutely be used by utilities. And when we talk about utilities, there's different definitions, right? So I guess in the context here, we say utility is someone who delivers. There's two different things. There's people who sell you electricity, and there's people who deliver your electricity. And they're actually two different organizations most of the time, or at least they're two different departments in an energy corporation. So when we're talking about utility, we're normally talking about the poles and the wires that deliver it, and they may also sell you electricity as well. The key bit here is we've had a lot of discussions with the major utilities here. We've had discussions with utilities all over the world, actually. And what they're really interested in right now, most of all, that we see as the biggest pattern is customer centricity. What does it mean to have your customer actually like you and actually want to have energy from you? And what does innovation through decentralization really look like? They're the two big things. We're moving away from centralized generation. Everyone knows that. That's totally fine. Fossil fuels will be eradicated fairly shortly because the economics just stack up, because everything else is cheaper. All the clean energy is cheaper. Most clean energy is cheaper in most places in the world. So those two things, customer centricity and innovation and decentralization, are things that iron is essentially built on. So that customer centricity, because it starts in the home, it's actually something useful to that person, that customer, and decentralization, because as David said, it's a peer-to-peer network of nodes acting together. So we welcome, absolutely 100% welcome working with utilities to put this into place, as long as it represents the customer centricity and the decentralized innovation that we think is needed. I mean, that's how I'd answer it.
It's great. And I think I love it.
Yeah,
how do you you really went for it. It's great. How do you explain how proof of balance works?
Yeah, cool. Proof of balance. So proof of balance really is just a mechanism to enable us to validate that something has happened in the grid that's useful for the grid. That's basically it. So it's not dissimilar to proof of service in Hollow and proof of coverage in something like Helium. The idea here is the proof of balance says, hey, we've got these different devices that are working together. One demands something, another one does something in response to that. And a third party, a witness, says, yes, I saw that happen. Yes, we've proved that balance has happened, and then records that into the holochain system, which then can be placed obviously into a immutable understanding of what's happening on that grid. So what's important about this is, so proof of balance is important because ultimately what you want in the grid is balance between supply and demand at all times. But it's just not like that, because demand and supply goes up and down all the time, and depending on weather and what you're building and all the stuff that's going on that society needs. So proof of balance is there to help validate that balance has happened. It could be a tiny balance, like my dryer has switched off and your dryer is running because you wanted your dryer on 100% right now. And I was cool to have it on 2 hours later. Cool, that happened. Someone else, another device has witnessed it. Great, that's happened. That device that witnessed it is providing a service to the grid, because then that is an immutable action that can be recorded to the grid, which the grid ultimately can pay for when it's in stress. But that device then gets paid because it's provided that service, and that's it.
Yep.
It's just it's a ledgering system. Yeah, exactly. It's a ledgering system, but it's more than that. It's a dynamic interaction, IoT interaction system with a ledgering component that enables it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So John said he really liked the analogy, David, with the pendulum. I think that's really good. It's good to cover that stuff, right? Because it's easy to get really caught in what's happening today and think that's always the way things have been, but we've built things.
Exactly. And I think probably, there you go. So John's also asking two further questions. Can any device be a witness? on the Lejeune system you were just describing. And then he was talking about the, I think probably the after he's had got one final question, and then we'll probably wrap it up. And then we definitely want to do something early next week in a more horrible time zone for you. I think with the holochain ecosystem tends to really light up a little bit in the like your late evening, early afternoon, when you get sort of UK, Europe, tail end of Asia, and early US. So we'll try and get something that connects those time zones.
Cool, let's do it. There's a question there. Just can any device be a witness? Yes, absolutely. Technically, it can be. I mean, it's the same as any other node in holochain or holo. They have the same code. They look and they can see, they can hear, and they can understand, and they can act and record it. And that's all it is. We just
nothing special.
It's nothing special. No, exactly. There may be some different devices that can act as better witnesses than others. For example, a smart meter is a good witness because it understands a bunch of different devices happening behind the meter, and it understands what's happening on the grid. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can have a virtual microgrid made up just of air conditioners. Yeah. So it all depends on how you want, and that's why IOEC is so important, because it's a bunch of. If you check out the conversations that got like previous ecosystem sessions that you and I have done, David, but also the conversation with Art from a couple of days ago, we talk about the need for these different IOEC, and this is why when you look in the white paper, it's lots of different IOEC communities, is because they're going to be different in different ways, and that's totally good and useful, because you can't have one size solution that fits everybody here. Yeah, cool.
Okay, and the final one, from John is, what's happening in the next 50 to 100 days to make sure ION continues to grow? Well, maybe 50 to 100 days, and then I think I want to end with, and where do you think you might be in 2 years' time?
Yeah, wonderful. So next 50 to 100 days, obviously next 7 days, making sure we have a really great TGE and really great launch, fantastic. Let's extrapolate that out to the next 50 days. We've got a number of partnerships in the pipeline that are signed and we'll be announcing over the next 50 days, which are really exciting. And they span electric mobility all the way through to pretty hardcore DeFi, staking mechanisms, finance mechanisms, locking mechanisms, a bunch of different really good partnerships there that are really, we've been working on for quite a while to build out the value that sits within the ION ecosystem. Next 100 days, of course, we're in deep tech development already. We've got a lot of the tech built. We have to build more. So that's going to be coming out. We'll be publishing a roadmap very shortly. So when you see that, that's going to give you a lot more detail on what that roadmap looks like. But to give you a bit of an example of where we think this is heading and where we're planning this roadmap over the next 6 to 12 months, is that we have a campaign that we'll be launching the first virtual microgrids with ION, and how that's going to happen, how people have staked it, how people can get involved, how can they become the first validation nodes out there and be paid for that. That's really important. So the whole point of having this token is to bootstrap the network. And as we go through it, so that's bootstrapping. We have 3 phases. We have establishment, we have bootstrapping, and then we have ecosystem market. And what that is, establishment is now, next 50 days, arguably. After that, we've got bootstrapping the network, which is validation devices go in, the first validation devices, they start getting rewarded. And then we move to an ecosystem. Market is not probably the right word, an ecosystem development phase, whereby it's the ability for developers all over the world to develop on top of the ION protocol and provide services and get paid for it in ION tokens, but also to provide them to people so they make their energy systems even more efficient. And that's our whole thesis, that by having all these different brains involved and working on this with a common substrate to work on, we can start to find even more efficiencies in the system. Yeah, and one of it's really cool because one of our in Regrid, one of our VC investors is very smart, very forward-thinking VC, and he's like, Adam, what you guys are doing here is you're building something that's so granular you can eke out every efficiency you can find in the system. That's incredible. So everyone's going to benefit. And what's really interesting there is like you couldn't do that without holochain. It's just so granular, and that granularity provides lots of opportunity for people to find new ways of doing stuff. So over the next 2 years, this is our mission to develop this, to enable people to come on, to use the ION token to stake and then get IOEC credits, to start using that to pre-purchase their energy credits to pay for energy and their energy usage value, the proof of balancing, and enable this to start to, I'd love to see this in the next 2 years start to emerge in pockets over the world. much like you saw Wikipedia like grow and grow and grow in terms of who's using it. And now you look at the picture of Wikipedia and it looks like synapses in the brain.
Yep.
That's what I want to see from this. And that's
amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. And David, yeah, I mean, like, you've seen this grow over the last 3 years. So I'm like, it's so awesome to be here with you at this point in time doing it together. So it's great. And we're so lucky to have Holochain and the community of Holochain. I want to say that absolutely genuinely. You guys have been behind us the whole way. And what an amazing community of people who want to see good stuff happen. And that's basically it, right?
So true.
Yeah, it's fun. Thank you.
Amazing stuff.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for David for being here as well. Getting up super early. And because it's always good when we get to like bounce this back and forth. So thank you for being here. My question to David is like, if you haven't had a cup of tea or a cup of coffee this morning, how are you doing it? And what's coming next as a cup of tea or a cup of coffee?
Yeah, I know. Well, and that's my morning with the kids. So I'm going to jump in a little while and see who's awake and get breakfast ready and lunches and do the school run. So it should be a good morning ahead. But yeah, it's nice switching from the excitement and the possibilities of this stuff to the realities of I don't like my breakfast, or make sure you give me enough food for lunch, or like, can I have chocolate in my lunchbox? So
that's it.
It keeps you grounded.
Keeps you grounded. I love that part of the day. That's awesome. Yeah, that's wicked. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate you guys being here with us on YouTube. Thank you, David. Fantastic to have you here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and thanks everyone. The Ion Red Grid community and all the hard work, and look forward to seeing another milestone next week. And yeah, as sort of John and the other questions are coming, and most importantly, what comes beyond that. So really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Yeah, thank you guys. We'll put in the show notes everything that you've asked, but really great questions. Thanks, John. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, NBN. Thanks, Marco. All you guys. Ryan, fantastic. All right, cool. Well, we will be in touch.